next question I'd got in advance was a question from Lee that she posed in the app. Right, okay. What I'd like to do is I'll give you a summary of her question. I'll also give you more or less my verbatim reply in the app because it points out or draws out a number of key things. Basically, Lee's question was about free will. And the question goes, if God saw silence creates everything, moves everything, every action, then there is no free will, question mark. There is something that I'm aware, there is something in my life that I'm aware is something that Lee will have to do at some point in the next year. I'm aware of fear around this and certain judgments, and also I should do now energy. Yet there's also more peaceful awareness that despite regular anxiety thoughts around this task, I don't feel I'm in charge of when I will do this task. Can you clarify, please? I'm going to give you a pretty much verbatim response that I jotted down because it's useful, and then I'll go on to the follow-up that Lee has and the experience that emerged from what I shared. So what I said at the time, which was just under a month ago, was a key awareness to embrace is that ultimately you are freedom itself. That is, in an absolute sense, beyond the concept of freedom and its opposites, which we might describe as enslavement to the limited identity self. So you are freedom itself. This experiential realization of ultimate liberation from the identity state, which is rooted in opposites, freedom, enslavement in this case, before and beyond concepts, the constraint of time and space. So you are, in truth, absolute freedom, beyond even the concept of free will. The identity self, that which we think and believe we are, has the experience or idea of free will, freedom of choice. And to a limited degree, we have that. But essentially, the essence of that which you are is before and beyond all this. And in the human form, the universe gifts itself the appearance of choice. I'm just summarizing this here for you down. And I capture this as head or heart. If you go with the head, identity, you suffer. If you go with the heart, it will lead you to self-realization. To the true non-personal essence. You may suffer either mildly or in the extreme. But if you go with the heart, whilst you'll still have to face your stuff, as I was pointing out with Stefan earlier, eventually it will lead to realization. Now, the experience of choice is happening, as I've said earlier, on the green screen of consciousness. And it's all being seen by the awareness that you are. It looks and feels very real, just like it can do with special effects in movies. And that's okay. It's meant to be like that. There would not be the gift of experience were it not for this effect of the universe. The universe sees it as neither right nor wrong. It just is. And as we were saying with Stefan earlier, the suffering comes with identifying with the I thought. The process is going on. And that leads to the development of the emotional pain body and so on. Going with the head is not wrong from the universe's perspective. It's just a rocky road. It leads eventually from breakdown to breakthrough, which is a tougher path than going with the heart, which will open you up from the inside. You're still going to have to face your stuff though. So letting life lead the way, be opening to what the heart is calling to, is going to make the path easier. And that's why people ultimately, at some point in their life, feel some calling to this. It may be after 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. At some point, or it may be after several lifetimes, this calling is going to come. The question I asked Lee was, which feels most resonant? And if you're true with yourself, you'll see that it was going with the heart is the most resonant. So all of this is being created by the universe coming to know itself in its own experience, all in the play of consciousness. And from the universe's perspective, it's all okay. So that was Lee's first question. And then there's a follow-up to that. If I can find it. Here we go. So having read that, and she also watched one of the longer videos on the app, Trust the Heart, which I also pointed at in the response. Lee goes on to say, I know previously asked about free will. The response led to a shift. The control freak part of Lee has fallen away, is what she says. There's a seeing that there is no self, small s self, ego self, in control. There is just source energy moving through this body, named Lee, and in this realization, so much has fallen away. Just a couple of things to pick up on there. Great seeing, because the identity self is a control freak, even if you don't think that you're trying to be that. By identifying with that, essentially you're trying to control life. And basically it's trying to keep itself safe. Great seeing there, Lee. So there's this perception or illusion of control of life when life itself is that which you are. That's the funny part of it. Lee goes on to say, at present, there's awareness of slowing down, resting more. It feels like all previous desires to achieve something are evaporating under awareness. And there is presently grief and sadness. Very important awareness, this Lee. So the desires to achieve, which come from identification, to achieve something, to do something, to prove something, to be validated, those are falling away. And Lee says, there is presently grief and sadness. What I'm about to say might sound like the strangest thing, but great. Great that you're aware that there's grief and sadness. And the reason I say that is that grief and sadness are a letting go energy. And what you're letting go of, the good news here, Lee, is more belief, more of the belief that all you are is this limited identity I. And so that process of letting go can lead to the experience in the body of grief and sadness. But the grief and sadness is a phenomenon that is being witnessed if you allow yourself to feel it, but recognize you're the witness to it. hey presto, that which is beyond the grief or before the grief and the sadness will appear, and that will be peace, stillness, silence. So this is good news, Lee. There is a curiosity about how life will unfold. There's also an awareness of thoughts like, this made me laugh. I am becoming an old lady and now laughing at ego's antics. Lee also asked, oh, sorry, I missed a bit out there. Although there's an unfamiliar feeling to this, a lack of control, so the need to control is going, there is also a great relief and much peace. And that's what I was pointing to when one goes beyond the grief and the sadness. A relief, a sense of relief and peace. Is this what they call surrender? Is what Lee's saying. Is this what they call surrender? At one level, the answer to that, Lee, is yes. It's surrendering to that which is, the giving up of the idea, the identification with, the attachment to, the belief that all I am is this body-mind. And so that process might be called surrender from the perspective of the body-mind experience. And that's where the grief and sadness is coming from, that letting go process, the surrendering process. But also, it's also important to embrace this, what I'm about to say is, actually, because your essence always has been, always will be, the infinite silence, the infinite awareness, then actually, this sounds crazy to the mind of what I'm about to say, there is nothing for you to surrender to because you're always eternally that. But there is this process of life going on, of experiencing itself. And so the process is okay, and it will call that surrender.